How do you say hello?
Hola.
How do you say yes?
Sí.
How do you say no?
No.
How do you say please?
Por favor.
How do you say thanks?
Gracias.
How do you say water?
Agua.
How do you say mom?
Mamá.
How do you say dad?
Papá.
How do you say friend?
Amigo.
How do you say love?
Amor.
How do you say baby?
Bebé.
How do you say house?
Casa.
How do you say food?
Comida.
How do you say dog?
Perro.
How do you say cat?
Gato.
How do you say one?
Uno.
How do you say two?
Dos.
How do you say three?
Tres.
How do you say day?
Día.
How do you say night?
Noche.
How do you say good?
Bueno.
How do you say bad?
Malo.
How do you say big?
Grande.
How do you say small?
Pequeño.
How do you say hot?
Caliente.
How do you say cold?
Frío.
How do you say man?
Hombre.
How do you say woman?
Mujer.
How do you say boy?
Niño.
How do you say girl?
Niña.
How do you say school?
Escuela.
How do you say teacher?
Profesor.
How do you say car?
Carro.
How do you say money?
Dinero.
How do you say work?
Trabajo.
How do you say city?
Ciudad.
How do you say music?
Música.
How do you say party?
Fiesta.
How do you say beach?
Playa.
How do you say family?
Familia.
How do you say happy?
Feliz.
How do you say sad?
Triste.
How do you say easy?
Fácil.
How do you say hard?
Difícil.
How do you say fast?
Rápido.
How do you say slow?
Lento.
How do you say open?
Abrir.
How do you say close?
Cerrar.
How do you say eat?
Comer.
How do you say drink?
Beber.
How do you say go?
Ir.
How do you say come?
Venir.
How do you say see?
Ver.
How do you say speak?
Hablar.
How do you say think?
Pensar.
How do you say buy?
Comprar.
How do you say pay?
Pagar.
How do you say store?
Tienda.
How do you say street?
Calle.
How do you say door?
puerta.
How do you say window?
Ventana.
How do you say table?
Mesa.
How do you say chair?
Silla.
How do you say bed?
Cama.
How do you say phone?
Teléfono.
How do you say number?
Número.
How do you say name?
Nombre.
How do you say question?
Pregunta.
How do you say answer?
Respuesta.
How do you say time?
Tiempo.
How do you say today?
Hoy.
How do you say tomorrow?
Mañana.
How do you say yesterday?
Ayer.
How do you say always?
Siempre.
How do you say never?
Nunca.
How do you say here?
Aquí.
How do you say there?
Allí.
How do you say inside?
Dentro.
How do you say outside?
Afuera.
How do you say again?
Otra vez.